Have you ever laid down in the dark, closed your eyes, and noticed shapes appearing behind your eyelids? Lines, grids, pulsing lights, as if there were a living pattern organizing itself within the night. For some it may seem like nothing, but for you it feels different, unsettling in a particular way, as if your perception were picking up on something that doesn't fit into common explanations. Many chosen ones go through this in silence. They try to talk about it and are met with laughter, shallow explanations, or people saying it's just tiredness. So you keep it to yourself. But the experience returns. It returns when the house is quiet, when your mind slows down, when life enters a moment of transition. And then the doubt arises. Why do I see this? Why do I feel this? The truth is that not everyone perceives the layers of the invisible, not because they are lesser, but because they live numbed by excess. Screens, noise, rush, worry. The chosen one cannot fully disconnect. They feel the atmosphere, perceive the energy, pick up on nuances. When the world darkens, the noise fades, and what was muffled starts to appear. And this is where the title makes sense. In symbolic language, the chosen of Thoth are those who carry a mind more attuned to patterns, to codes, to reading the invisible. Thoth, associated with knowledge and sacred writing, represents the consciousness that learns to observe with precision. This doesn't need to turn into fear or superstition. It also doesn't need to become pride. The point here is to walk with maturity. Observe without forcing, breathe without panicking, record without inventing stories. Because the pattern is not there for entertainment. It tends to push you toward alignment, more truthful choices, and a life more coherent with who you are. I'm George. Follow the channel and stay with me. The nighttime pattern that only the chosen of Thoth perceive. You're lying down. The lights are off, your eyes are closed. And suddenly, something appears in the dark. Lines, grids, shapes that seem to pulse. Sometimes it looks like a living geometry, too organized to be just anything. Your mind tries to explain, this is imagination, this is fatigue, this is the brain. But at the same time, there's a place inside you that recognizes, this is not random. Many chosen ones go through this in silence. Because when they try to tell someone, the reaction is usually the same. Mockery, distrust, shallow explanations. And since you don't want to seem exaggerated, you keep it to yourself. But the experience returns. Especially when you're between wakefulness and sleep. Especially when the house is quiet. Especially when you're going through an emotional or spiritual transition. In the language of the title, this is often described as a trait of the chosen of Thoth, people whose perception is tuned to structure, signs, and patterns. Thoth symbolizes the mind that reads, observes, and interprets reality as if there were a script behind things. Not out of vanity, but out of sensitivity. Not everyone perceives this kind of pattern, and that doesn't make you better. It just makes you more attuned to a layer most don't even notice. The night, for many chosen of Thoth, is not just rest. It's a portal of perception. Not in the sense of fantasy, but in the sense of amplification. A moment when distractions move away and the mind loses full control. And then the pattern appears more clearly, because you finally have inner space. Those who are trapped in external noise have difficulty staying in silence. The chosen, however, no matter how tired, carry a calling. Something within wants to understand, to feel, to go beyond the surface. If you are perceiving nighttime patterns, the question is not, what's wrong with me? The question is, what is this trying to show me? And that question changes everything. What darkness turns off outside and lights up inside the chosen of Thoth. There is a very simple reason why many of these perceptions appear more at night. When the light fades, your mind stops being attacked by constant stimuli. During the day, the world demands quick responses. Sounds, screens, messages, tasks, expectations, traffic, people, worries. Even when you are still, your attention is being pulled somewhere. It's like trying to hear a whisper while the whole world is speaking at once. For most, that's normal. But for the chosen, especially the chosen of Thoth, excess weighs heavier. Because Thoth, symbolically, represents the mind that perceives codes and connections. Not in the sense of being better, but in the sense of having a more active radar for patterns, signs, and nuances. And when there's too much stimulation, that reading gets muffled. You feel it in your chest, in your breathing, in a tiredness that's not just physical. And often you don't even know why. You just feel that something inside you is saturated. Modern life has a trait that few notice. It was built to keep you from resting inside. Artificial light extends the day. Screens extend thinking. Noise extends anxiety. You lie down, but the mind keeps working, as if it's still on shift. And the chosen of Thoth feels this more intensely, because their mind doesn't just process the obvious. It processes the entire environment, the in-betweens, the tensions, the invisible information that goes unnoticed by others. Night changes the setting. When the room darkens and distractions lessen, the external volume drops. What was inside, but muffled, starts to emerge. Not because it was created in that moment, but because now there is space. And for the chosen of Thoth, that space reveals pattern. Lines, grids, pulsing light, organization where before there was only darkness. It's as if your system finally had the freedom to show what was hidden beneath the excess. This also explains why, in many cases, you only perceive these forms when the lights are truly off, and you slow down. During the day, your mind is busy surviving socially, responding, producing, adapting. At night, when there's no more performance, what's internal becomes more audible. And then you realize that your inner world is not empty. It's full of structure. For the chosen of Thoth, the night is not just the end of the day. Many times, it's the only moment when you can hear your own presence without interference. And once you start to understand this, you stop fighting the night and start respecting it. You create transition. Less screen before bed, less noise, more care, more pause. Not out of superstition, but out of emotional intelligence. The dark doesn't create the pattern, it reveals it. And for the chosen of Thoth, revelation is the beginning of the path. The pattern is unique to you, and Thoth doesn't speak the same way to everyone. One of the first things the chosen notice when they begin paying attention to these experiences is that no one sees exactly the same thing. Some report well-defined grids, almost like an organized mesh. Others see spirals in constant motion. Others describe geometric flowers that open and close. Some perceive clear symbols, and some see no image at all, but feel everything in the body. Pressure, vibration, heat, expansion. In the beginning, this can be confusing. The mind tries to compare, to figure out which perception is the correct one. This comparison is natural, because we were taught to seek identical patterns for everyone. But within the symbolic language of Thoth, this is not a mistake. It's precisely how it's meant to work. Thoth represents living knowledge, knowledge that adapts to the reader. It's not a rigid, uniform understanding. It is knowledge that molds itself to the consciousness that receives it. That's why the chosen of Thoth don't receive a standard screen. They receive a language compatible with their own inner structure. None of these forms is better. None is more evolved. None indicates someone is more chosen than another. The pattern doesn't require performance. It doesn't ask you to see more or better or the same as anyone else. It adapts to your system, because forcing an incompatible language would create shock, fear, or confusion. Thoth, symbolically, does not teach by imposition. He teaches through translation. And to accompany is very different from trying to control. Control wants results. Accompaniment respects the process. Control demands quick answers. Accompaniment accepts time. Control creates tension. Accompaniment creates space. For the chosen of Thoth, this lesson is central. Because Thoth doesn't deliver ready-made knowledge. He delivers paths for reading. Thoth doesn't speak aloud. He doesn't shout. He doesn't impose. He communicates through compatibility. And compatibility requires respect for one's own rhythm. When the chosen one understands this, something stabilizes inside. The experience stops being a frightening mystery and becomes silent communication. Not something that throws you off balance, but something that brings you inward. The pattern is unique because you are unique, and that is not a problem to be corrected. It is precisely what allows the experience to happen without rupture. When you accept that Thoth speaks to you in the way you are able to hear, the path becomes lighter, clearer, and more truthful. The chosen of Thoth does not need to see like anyone else. They only need to perceive in the way they perceive. And that, in itself, is already part of the teaching. It feels like I'm being watched. Thoth tests your response. At some point in the experience, many chosen ones report something that goes beyond seeing shapes, lights, or organized patterns. A deeper sensation arises, one that is hard to put into words. It feels like the pattern looks back, not like a human gaze, not like someone watching out of curiosity or judgment, but like a conscious presence. And it's exactly at that moment that something decisive happens inside. Two paths open clearly, fear or reverence. This closing is not punishment, it's mechanical. The human system cannot sustain subtle perception when it enters a state of threat. Fear creates internal noise, and noise interrupts listening. For many, this is the point at which the experience breaks, disappears, or becomes confusing. And that's understandable. We were taught to react with fear to what we cannot control. But for the chosen of Thoth, the central lesson is not in fear. It's in the conscious response. Thoth, symbolically, represents the trained mind, the intelligence that observes without collapsing. He doesn't teach escape, nor aggressive confrontation. He teaches presence. This moment does not arise to frighten, but to reveal how you relate to the unknown. Some respond with fear, others with idolization. Both are extremes that close the process. Fear closes it because it generates contraction. Idolization closes it because it generates projection. When someone starts to think that what they're seeing is something superior that must be worshipped, the mind once again loses center. It creates fantasy. It creates dependency. It creates imbalance. Thoth teaches neither terror nor adoration. He teaches balance. Thoth, as a symbol of integrated knowledge, does not deliver ready-made answers at this stage. He observes how you respond. And that response says more about your internal state than any form, symbol, or light you might see. The true learning here is not in the content of the experience, but in the posture toward it. In the end, Thoth does not test whether you are special. He tests whether you are stable. He does not test what you see, but how you respond. And that response defines whether the path closes or continues to open, with calm, depth, and truth. Intensification, symbolization, and direction, the path of the chosen of Thoth. Over time, many chosen begin to realize that the experience does not happen in a chaotic or random way. There is a movement that repeats itself with enough frequency to be recognized. First, the pattern intensifies. Then it begins to take on more symbolic forms. And finally, it transforms into practical direction. This is not a fixed rule, nor a mandatory ladder that everyone must climb in the same way. But it is a common path for many chosen of Thoth. The first phase is usually intensification. At the beginning, the pattern appears discreetly. Sometimes only in the dark, sometimes only for a few seconds, sometimes so subtle that you almost doubt whether you really saw anything. But as you don't panic and don't try to block the experience, it begins to repeat itself. What appeared rarely starts to show up more often. Not because something external is increasing, but because your perception is becoming more finely tuned. For the chosen of Thoth, this intensification is like learning to hear a new language. At first, everything sounds like noise. Then, you start to recognize patterns. The internal system learns to sustain that frequency without going into alert mode. The body relaxes more quickly. The mind creates less resistance, and the pattern finds space to manifest more clearly. The second phase is symbolization. At some point, the pattern stops being just light, movement, or abstract geometry and begins to take on forms with meaning. For some, recurring symbols appear. For others, specific images. For others still, more organized geometric forms, almost like a visual language. This does not mean that someone is sending literal messages. It means that your consciousness has begun to translate perception into something recognizable. The third phase is direction, and this is the most practical part, and also the most demanding. After perception intensifies and organizes itself symbolically, something begins to change in the way you make decisions. A firmer intuition arises, less emotional, less confused. It is not impulse, it is not fantasy. It is a simple clarity that manifests in the body. This aligns, this misaligns. For the chosen of Thoth, this direction does not appear as orders or commands. It emerges as internal coherence. Certain choices begin to feel heavy, even before any external consequences appear. Others bring lightness, even when they are difficult. The body responds. The mind recognizes it, and ignoring it becomes increasingly uncomfortable. In the end, this progression reveals something essential. The path of the chosen of Thoth is not to escape the world, but to inhabit it better. It is not to accumulate experiences, but to live with more truth. The chosen is not the one who sees more things. The chosen is the one who learns to live better from what they perceive. And when this understanding settles in, the pattern ceases to be an enigma and becomes a silent ally in the return to one's own center. The real danger. The ego steals the crown of Thoth. Here there is an essential caution that needs to be stated clearly, especially for those who recognize themselves as sensitive, perceptive, and in the process of awakening. Not every danger on this path comes from the unknown, from the pattern, or from the experience itself. The real danger arises when the ego tries to appropriate the experience and turn it into identity. When this happens, wisdom is lost, and symbolically, it is as if the ego steals the crown of Thoth. Within the symbol of Thoth, this is a clear deviation. Thoth does not represent inflated personal power. He represents wisdom, balance, measure, responsibility. Thoth is not the god of ego exaltation, but of the mind that understands limits, relationships, and consequences. When someone uses the experience to place themselves above others, they are no longer walking with Thoth. They are walking with their own shadow. The true chosen of Thoth is not defined by what they see, but by how they live. They do not collect visions like trophies. They do not need to convince anyone of anything. On the contrary, the more genuine the experience, the simpler the person becomes. More human, more attentive to their own mistakes, more aware of the impact their choices have on their own body, on relationships, and on the environment. When someone begins to isolate themselves too much, to break relationships without clarity, to neglect the body or basic routine in the name of a supposed mission, it is time to stop. Not to advance, not to force. To stop, to breathe, to adjust. This is not failure, this is maturity. There are clear warning signs that should not be ignored. If the experience is leading you to constant anxiety, mental confusion, a sense of grandiosity, fear, emotional instability, or progressive isolation, something has gone out of place. Not because the pattern is bad, but because integration has failed. Spirituality without grounding turns into confusion, and confusion is not the path of Thoth. That is why returning to the basics is always an act of wisdom. Sleeping well, eating simply, keeping minimally stable schedules, taking care of the body, having contact with nature, being silent, breathing. How to walk with this? The simple practice of the chosen of Thoth. If you want to deal with this experience in a balanced, safe, and mature way, the path begins with simplicity. This is not a detail. It is Thoth's teaching in action. Thoth never taught through haste, excess, or spectacle. He teaches through careful observation, the right rhythm, and sustained attention. Therefore, do not force the experience. Do not try to provoke anything. Simply create the conditions. But the most important point of all is integration. This is the true test of the chosen of Thoth. The experience itself is not the goal. The central question is not, what did I see? But what is this inviting me to change in practice? If there is no concrete change, the experience becomes mere curiosity. And curiosity without integration does not sustain the path. Sometimes, integration is simple. Going to sleep earlier, reducing nighttime stimuli, respecting your own fatigue, setting boundaries in environments that drain you. Other times, it is deeper, speaking a truth that has been avoided, changing an incoherent decision, ending a cycle that no longer makes sense. Thoth doesn't speak to impress, he speaks to adjust. The pattern does not ask for mystical interpretation. It signals alignment or misalignment. It points, it does not command. Who decides is you, and that is spiritual maturity. The chosen grows when they understand that expansion of consciousness without a change in behavior is unsustainable. When practical life remains in conflict with what the body and perception already know, the experience tends to become uncomfortable. Seeing the pattern is not the trophy. It is not the end. It is the beginning of a more honest relationship with yourself. A relationship where you learn to listen without getting lost, to perceive without inflating, to adjust without dramatizing. Reaching this point already says a lot about you. Most people prefer to ignore what they do not understand, label it quickly, and move on distracted. The chosen of Thoth cannot do that. They feel, perceive, and return to the same point until they find meaning. When patterns begin to emerge in the dark, when the mind slows down and the world quiets, this does not happen by chance. It is an invitation, not to escape reality, but to deepen your relationship with yourself. Throughout this entire path, one central message repeats. The nighttime pattern is not a mistake, it is not a threat, and it is not a privilege to feed vanity. It is a sign of sensitivity, an indication that when the excess fades away, your inner perception finds space. For the chosen of Thoth, this is natural, because Thoth symbolizes exactly that kind of mind, capable of reading what lies beneath the surface, without haste and without fantasy. None of this requires fear. None of this requires worship. And none of this requires you to feel different in the sense of superiority. On the contrary, the truer the process, the more it demands humility, balance, and integration. The pattern does not want to pull you out of the world. It wants to place you more fully within it. It wants you to live with less inner conflict, less emotional noise, and more coherence between what you feel and what you do. The great difference is not in what you see, but in how you respond. When there is panic, the body shuts down, and the experience becomes uncomfortable. When there is calm curiosity, perception organizes itself, not because you invoked something, but because you stopped resisting. Many chosen of Thoth discover that the night is not the enemy. It is the space where control lessens and inner truth can appear without interference. It also becomes clear that there is no single model of experience. Some see lines, others grids, others pulsing lights, others symbols, others feel everything in the body. Thoth does not speak the same to everyone because each consciousness has its own language. Comparing only creates anxiety. Accepting your own way of perceiving creates stability, and stability is essential for the experience not to turn into confusion. Another fundamental point is care with the ego. The true danger was never the pattern, but the temptation to use the experience as identity. When that happens, the path is lost. The chosen of Thoth matures when they become simpler, more responsible, and more present. They integrate. They do not abandon practical life. They understand that wisdom without grounding becomes imbalance. In the end, everything converges to the same direction: integration. The pattern is not the goal. It is the beginning of a return to presence, to center, to coherence. It invites real adjustments, in rhythm, in choices, in boundaries, in ways of living, without spectacle, without haste, without fear. This is the true path of the chosen of Thoth. Now I want to hear from you. What do you perceive when you close your eyes in the dark? Shapes, lights, patterns, symbols, or bodily sensations? Share something from your experience in the comments. Your words may help other chosen ones who are still living this in silence.